United States.
US President Donald Trump said the US would take over the war-ravaged Gaza Strip and develop it after Palestinians had resettled elsewhere.
And I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
It's a move that would shatter decades of US policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Speaking after a Tuesday meeting with Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, Trump did not provide specifics and did not directly respond to how and under what authority the US can take over and occupy Gaza long term.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area.
Netanyahu, whose military has fought for more than a year with Hamas militants in Gaza, would not be drawn into discussing the proposal in depth, but said Trump was, quote, showing willingness to puncture conventional thinking. Trump also announced earlier the proposal to permanently resettle Palestinians from Gaza to countries like Jordan, Egypt, and other neighbouring Arab states. That goes beyond suggestions he has made about Gazan resettlement that Arab leaders have already steadfastly rejected. Forced displacement of Gaza's population would likely be a violation of international law and be fiercely opposed by Western allies. Some human rights advocates liken the idea to ethnic cleansing. Analyst Brian Katulis from the Middle East Institute told Reuters that he believes the proposals lack thought.
Most certainly there's no plan behind this. And if there is, it's not a plan that has any connection to reality in today's Middle East, and it's certainly not in consultation with the Palestinians or neighboring countries like Egypt and Jordan.
Senior Hamas official Sami Abu Zuri condemned Trump's calls for Gazans to leave as expulsion from their land and a recipe for generating chaos and tension in the region.
Syria's transitional leader Ahmed Ashara arrived in Turkey on Tuesday as he seeks to burnish his legitimacy on the international stage. The former rebel leader, who declared himself Syria's interim president last week, was warmly received by President Tayyip Erdogan. Ashara's success in the lightning advance that overthrew dictator Bashar al-Assad was aided by Turkey, which backed anti-Assad forces during Syria's 13-year civil war. His visit to Turkey aims, in large part, to restore trade between the neighbors, which is already surging. Turkish Exporters Assembly data show exports to Syria rose 20% in December when Assad was overthrown and jumped by more than 38% in January. But it's about diplomacy as well as trade. This is Ashara's second foreign visit since seizing power. On Sunday, he met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh. He's also looking beyond the Middle East. Moscow this week said it was in negotiations with Damascus over Russian military bases in Syria. And in an interview with The Economist magazine, Ashara said his government aims to restore ties with the United States in the coming days. But he said he has not yet had any contact with the Trump administration. Syria is still under heavy economic sanctions from Washington. In January, the outgoing Biden administration issued a sanctions exemption for transactions with Syrian governing institutions for 6 months. One sticking point, though, could be the fate of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. The U.S. has backed the group, which was a chief fighting force in the coalition effort against Islamic State. Turkey views the People's Protection Units, a militia that spearheads the SDF, as an extension of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or YPG. The YPG has been waging an insurgency against the Turkish state since 1984 and is deemed a terrorist group by both Turkey and the U.S. And there are signs of rising tensions. A car bomb killed 20 people in the northern Syrian city of Manbij on Monday. The city changed hands a number of times. The SDF captured it from ISIS in 2016. In December, Turkish-backed rebels seized it from the SDF. There were no immediate claims of responsibility. It came just 2 days after another car bomb in the same city killed 4 people, according to Syria's state news agency.
Mexican soldiers were mobilized to the U.S. border on Tuesday to crack down on fentanyl trafficking. It's part of a deal between U.S. President Donald Trump and Mexico's leader Claudia Sheinbaum to pause his threat of tariffs for a month. National Guard Coordinator Jose Luis Santos Isa spoke to the media.
The personnel that have just arrived belong to the National Guard.
They arrived because of the recent agreements between President Claudia Sheinbaum and President Donald Trump, which consist of reinforcing the northern border of our country with people of the National Guard to avoid drug trafficking from Mexico to the United States, especially of fentanyl.
The plan to eventually deploy 10,000 Mexican soldiers is an initial concession that was announced on Monday. Sheinbaum said Washington also made promises to try and stop the flow of high-powered weapons from the United States over the border into Mexico. Mexico argues that more than 500,000 guns are trafficked annually into the country from the US. Analysts Reuters spoke to say the hefty concentration of Mexican troops at the border could leave other areas of the country vulnerable. Sheinbaum has threatened retaliatory tariffs if Trump makes good on his threat of 25% duties on Mexican imports. A trade war between Mexico and the US would likely throw Mexico into a recession, while US consumers would have been hit with higher prices on Mexican imports, including cars and trucks. Mexico's economy minister, Marcelo Ebrard, told reporters on Tuesday that they believed a month was, quote, more than enough to strike a deal to head off Trump's threats.
Greenland's prime minister says it will hold a general election this March as it finds itself in the sights of US President Donald Trump. The semi-sovereign Arctic island is a Danish territory. However, Trump said last month he wanted to gain control of Greenland for its vast untapped mineral resources and did not rule out using military or economic force to achieve this goal. On Tuesday, lawmakers in Greenland moved to ban foreign and anonymous donations to political parties in response to fears of foreign intervention in the upcoming vote. This week, Greenland also tightened rules on foreign real estate and property investments. Independence from the Kingdom of Denmark is expected to be a central issue in the March elections. All 5 parliamentary parties support independence, while differing on how and when it could be achieved. The opposition party Nalarak, which holds 5 seats in the 31-seat parliament, wants to sever ties with Denmark immediately. Pelle Broberg is its leader.
We have last week presented 5 pillars for our coming election strategy, but if I can sum it up, it's much easier just to mention some of the headlines. The most important one is to start the process of independence from Denmark.
A recent survey showed a majority of Greenlanders would vote for independence if a referendum were held now. Liv Aurora Jensen, a candidate for the left-wing Inuit Ataqatigiit party, says many Greenlanders are exasperated by the lack of development in Greenland, with its economy heavily relying on Danish grants. And the recent sight of Donald Trump Jr. visiting Greenland after his father promised Greenland would benefit tremendously if it becomes part of the US seemed to prove their point.
Of Trump's visit here, it really started escalating to talk about independence and who we are as a people. And I think it was a shock for Denmark, you know. I think the Danish government and the Danish people woke up because the biggest country, the biggest power in the world came and said, we want to have Greenland because you cannot take care of it. You cannot develop it.
Greenland has been controlled by Denmark for centuries. In 2009, the island was granted broad self-governing autonomy, including the right to declare independence from Denmark through a referendum. Recent polls show that 45% would still oppose independence if it negatively affected living standards, a sign the path to leaving Denmark may not be so clear. In response to Trump's interest, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said on Monday that Greenland is not for sale and reiterated it remains a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And the territory's Prime Minister Mute Egde said in a recent social media post without mentioning Trump, quote, "We are in the midst of a serious time, a time that we have never experienced in our country. This is not the time for internal division."
The US Postal Service is suspending the delivery of parcels coming from China and Hong Kong. That follows President Donald Trump's move to shut a trade loophole that allowed small-value packages to be shipped duty-free. The so-called de minimis provision allowed importers and U.S. shoppers to avoid duties on goods worth less than $800. By late Tuesday, the USPS had not said whether its move directly flows from that, but it says the delivery of letters will be unaffected. The change poses a big challenge for fast-growing online retailers like Temu and Shein. They've built big businesses shipping products from China at rock-bottom prices, often using the de minimis rule. Together, the two firms probably accounted for more than 30% of all parcels shipped to the U.S. each day under the loophole. That's according to a congressional committee report in 2023. Now, Trump has also imposed an extra 10% tax on Chinese goods.
We're going to do very well against China and against everybody else.
Anticipating such moves, Shein and Temu have both taken steps, including setting up warehouses in the U.S. and sourcing more goods from outside China. Even so, experts say U.S. shoppers are likely to see prices rise for products bought from such firms. And the bad news for Shein and Temu might not end there. Reports by news website Semaphore claim the Department of Homeland Security could add the pair to its list of firms suspected of using forced labor. The report said no final decision had been made and there was no comment from either firm. Responding to Trump's tariffs, Beijing has put several U.S. companies, including Alphabet's Google, on notice that they could face sanctions from China.
In a sprawling camp for displaced people in southern Gaza's Deir al-Balah, the Mohammed family are bracing themselves for an emotional return home to the north as a ceasefire holds between Israel and Hamas. Ismail Mohammed says he's so happy about going home, he hasn't slept for 3 nights.
I long for my land, my town Jabalia, and the people of the north, to see our family, kin and children.
Early in the war, Israel had ordered civilians to leave the north. Like most others, Mohammed fled with his wife, 6 children, and one of his son's young family. But Mohammed's wife, Badrea, says the family found no safety in the south.
The Israelis hit a tent next to us. Shrapnel passed by the children while they were sleeping here. It went through the cover while I was here in the tent. The children were sick from fear and terror.
Since last month's ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas, hundreds of thousands of people have left the crowded temporary shelters across the south to trek back north. And they know there's more heartbreak ahead. The Mohammed family learned from relatives an Israeli strike had destroyed their home. Still, Badrea says the whole family can't wait to return.
I'd rather live on rubble with my children, spread a sheet and sit on it while touching the rubble of my house, than stay here for a second more.
Deir al-Balah is only 11 miles from their Jabalia home. But like most in Gaza, the Mohammeds don't have access to a car. It's a tough walk for Ismail, who has diabetes and lost an arm to it before the war. His leg was injured in an airstrike and he has to walk with a stick. Seeing the extent of the enclave's destruction also hits him hard.
This is an extermination, not destruction. This is a genocide. The Israelis did not have mercy on stones, trees, or anything. Gaza is destroyed.
Over the 15 months of war triggered by Hamas's attack on Israel in October 2023, Palestinians have accused Israeli forces of indiscriminate bombardment. Israel accuses Hamas of hiding among civilian populations and says it has tried to minimize harm to civilians. In Jabalia, the Mohammeds find their neighborhood mostly flattened. Ismail is relieved to reach the destination, but then points to what used to be their house. As he digs through the rubble, the harsh reality slowly takes over the bittersweet feeling of coming home. There is no joy or anything, he says. I wish we'd stayed in the south rather than seeing this destruction, this extermination.